Please clap.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words, tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Welcome to the show. It's Monday. It's the start of a whole new week of insanity, and we will be right here, not only covering it, but living in it. So, we'll start off with good news, though, because we actually do have a little bit of that. Also, of course, there's bad news. And we have that in spades, but there is one good thing that did happen today, and it actually involves the Supreme Court. So that's fun. We also are going to talk about, unemployment benefits. What is the White House saying about the expanded unemployment benefits? We also have evidence that we live in the most insane timeline. Ted Cruz versus Hellboy. Will that be a thing? I don't know. Might be awesome. Might be really weird. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And then Donald Trump versus reality, his poll numbers. And then where I'm going to go and disagree with some people in the Democratic Party. Big surprise. Stacey Abrams and even Cenk Uygur. So that should be fun. And it's, of course, about defund the police. So we have that. All right. In case you didn't notice, Bernie pointed out the handout to pick fossil fuel that SCOTUS passed, which was hidden. Yes, that's important. We'll talk about that tomorrow. A lot of news to get to today, though. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Again, a lot of news. The mastermind points out Black Lives Matter organizer and protester found dead. Wow. So a lot, like I said, lots of stuff to talk about. But we'll get to the good news first. We'll start out the start of the week with something a little bit more positive. Even though there was a gigantic handout to polluters, like the Koch brother, the remaining Koch brother. And so, yeah, why don't we start out with that? But before we do, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Helps out the show. Of course, let's see. Like and share. Super chats, of course, are always welcome. Comments as well. I like to read the comments during the show. Because I do like this to be a little bit interactive, have a little bit of fun together, and then because it's our show, TYT Nation. All right. Anyway, before I get to it, I'm going to awkwardly drink water like Donald Trump. That was a story that I could have done today. His awkward water drinking, but I decided against it. All right. In a bit of a surprising development, the conservative Supreme Court has ruled that workers cannot be fired for being gay or transgender. So now this is a 6-3 decision authored by Justice Neil Gorsuch, of all people, right? So now he argued in this majority opinion that an individual's homosexuality or transgender status is not relevant to employment decisions. Well, of course, that makes sense. That's what we've been arguing all along. But now he realizes that. Now he says that's because it is impossible to discriminate against a person for being homosexual or transgender without discriminating against that individual based on sex. And we already had bans out there saying that you cannot discriminate when it comes to employment people based on their sex. And so this is basically an expansion of that. And so, you know, laws that we currently have on the books that are now expanded towards people that are gay and LGBT. I mean, gay and trans, or all part of the LGBT community. So that's good. That's great. Fantastic. So now, a lot of you are like, oh my God, I can't believe Gorsuch would join with the liberals. Well, okay, well, here's the thing about Gorsuch, right? So this isn't a surprise for me, right? Brett Kavanaugh is your more social conservative. Gorsuch is pro-corporate. Corporations don't give a damn if you're gay or trans. You know what they care about? Money. That's what that is. They care about making money. And to be honest, of course, the LGBT community has money. And they have more money, more backing, and more support than, you know, the basic smattering of old bigots, essentially. And that's why the left, at least on some of these issues, has won the culture wars. Corporations look at LGBT customers and think, oh, well, their money's green. It spends. It spends just as much as straight money. Who cares? I don't care who you are or what you identify as. Money. All I care is about if you have money. If you don't have money, get the hell out of here. Fair enough. So that said, were there niche markets that, of course, play to angry bigots? Yes, there are. But again, they're niche. They're not in the mainstream anymore. Whereas LGBT rights are in the mainstream. And that's good. That's how society changes. That's how society progresses and evolves. And that's always a good thing, right? So now Gorsuch was joined by, of course, John Roberts, another conservative, and, of course, the liberal wing, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. So, of course, yeah, you're going to have all the four liberals. Now, of course, the dissent were Sam Alito, Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh. Those guys are the old culture warriors. And so they're like, no, let's not expand those protections to people. How sad. I mean, how sad of a person do you have to be? I know. They'll use like, oh, no, we're constructionists and we shouldn't expand rights to anybody that isn't a wealthy white landowner male. Well, then Clarence Thomas himself wouldn't have any rights if we go back to the original constructionists. But okay, whatever, right? We know those guys are basically just, I mean, they're not even serious. I don't even take them seriously. They're a parody of themselves. But anyway, whatever. So now advocacy groups, of course, were really happy about this. The decision, this is according to Kristen Brown, a co-chair of the National Trans Bar Association, saying the decision sends an unambiguous message that equal protection of the law applies to all, and that an employee's failure to adhere to an employer's gender stereotype is not a license to discriminate. Sarah K. Ellis, president of CEO of GLAAD, said the decision affirms what shouldn't have been even a debate. LGBTQ Americans should be able to work without fear of losing jobs because of who they are. Now, the weird thing is, I mean, when they bring up this shouldn't even be a discussion. You're right. A lot of Americans really didn't even know that this was an open question. They're like, wait a minute. Why should your employer make that decision? Like, don't we already have protections for those people? Turns out, in at least half of the states, we didn't. And so, yes, we needed a federal protection, a federal ruling, and now we actually have one. And so that's a good thing, right? So now the cases were brought by three workers who said they were fired from their jobs because they were gay or transgender. They argued that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which says employers may not discriminate based on sex, also applies to sexual orientation and gender identity. And of course, that was a compelling argument, enough for even some of the conservatives on the court to be able to say, yeah, that does apply. Even if Gorsuch himself was like, I don't really like trans people or gay people, but man, when you base it on the sex and on the reading, I mean, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Seems really, really obvious, but apparently not obvious again enough to the very socially conservative justices that we have. So especially Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah. Now Gorsuch also wrote, it doesn't matter if other factors besides the plaintiff's sex contributed to the decision, and it doesn't matter if the employee treated women as a group the same when compared to men as a group. If the employer intentionally relies in part on an individual employee's sex when deciding to discharge the employee, put differently, if changing the employee's sex would have yielded a different choice by the employer, a statutory violation has occurred. And that, of course, makes sense. Discrimination based on sex is discrimination, flat out, period. And obviously now, and it should have been for a long time, basing employment on sexual orientation or gender. It doesn't really matter. You as an employer have no right to get into somebody's personal life. If it's not related to the job, it shouldn't matter. And believe it or not, I think that, again, many people did not realize that this was a question, that this had happened, that happened all the time. And now, thanks to this ruling, it won't. So this is great. This is a great positive step forward for the LGBTQ plus community. And so this is something to celebrate. We now have equal employment protection. Awesome. All right.
Understand that the $600 plus up, that's above the state unemployment benefits that they will continue to receive, is in effect a disincentive. I mean, we're paying people not to work. It's better than their salaries would get.
That was White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow complaining, albeit in a strange way, that pay for workers is too low. I mean, that's exactly what he's talking about. Oh, I mean, we're paying people too much on unemployment. And the result of that, of course, is that, well, workers don't get enough money at their jobs. He came, of course, to the wrong conclusion about it, about what to do about it. But understand, like, that is the admission. People are getting paid on unemployment more than they would make at their jobs. And so his, solution to that, of course, is to, well, obviously, we got to pay people less on unemployment. We don't need to expand or raise wages for workers. Nope, can't do that. That hurts corporations. So now we have to reduce people's unemployment benefits. Now, that's $600 a week, right? That extra $600 a week on top of unemployment benefits, which in some states can go pretty low, down to just under or just over $200 or so a week. on unemployment, which really isn't a whole lot, especially if you had actually been making more at your job. And so this is this came along with the CARES Act, and it's been helping the now 40 million Americans that are unemployed thanks to the coronavirus pandemic. We have not seen this level of unemployment since the Great Depression. So now the administration has been pushing very, very hard to, open up the country. And in fact, Larry Kudlow is going to argue next that, well, we need to give people an incentive to go back to work as we're forcing the states to kind of open back up, or urging the states to open back up, I should say.
2218. I'm a subleaser. You want to look my name up?
Yeah.
That is the wrong video, and I'm not sure what is going on there. So let me go and try to fix that, because I'm not sure what is going on here.
But
That's
even
fine.
so, we don't, come over.
This is very strange.
That returning to employment, we are in the administration, the president is looking at a reform measure that will still provide some kind of bonus for returning to work, but it will not be as large, and it will create an incentive to work. That goes along with the other incentives we've generated.
What other incentives? I mean, the fact is that you cannot refuse a job and collect unemployment. So what other incentive is he talking about? He's talking about floating a payroll tax cut. That's what that is. Well, I mean, if we do a payroll tax cut, well, then that's going to get people to go back to work, but it's also going to hurt Social Security, and really it still isn't going to help the people, the millions of Americans who are still going to be unemployed. And so, come on. You realize it's only an extra $600 a week, right? It's not like they're making CEO pay here. It's not like they're making as much as Larry Kudlow would make, right? That $600, again, combined with state benefits as low as $285 a week in many states, only evens out to about a living wage. Again, and it varies greatly on the state. And so I find it kind of funny that the government realizes, or at least people in the government realize, that people need more to live on, and yet refuse to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Instead, Republicans are like, oops, we just accidentally made the case for higher wages. We have to end that. We have to put the kibosh on this one. Stop it now. Just stop. Can't have it. I mean, look, the only reason I think that this could pass, right? And Bernie Sanders stood up for this, and he said, no, I'm going to block this bill unless I'm going to trash the whole damn thing unless you give this extra $600 unemployment benefit on top of state unemployment benefits. I'm gonna crash it. And so these Republicans, look, they've been salivating at giving as much as $5 trillion to their wealthy donors, to corporations, right? And so they're like, we got to get this money to the corporations. We got to get this money to the banks. Our donors really, they want this. The stock market, oh my God, our stocks are tanking. We got to do something about this. And so they let it go, but they didn't realize the implications, where now you have, people that are sitting at home, right? That can't go back to their job thanks to coronavirus. Now they're getting a living wage or something close to it. And they're like, wow, turns out we've been getting screwed over by our employers for quite some time. Maybe we should be in favor, maybe we should actually have higher wages, a living wage. Oops. And look, here's the thing, right? So now Kudlow's going to talk about like, oh, we want a good economic recovery, and that's why we're, basically trying to reopen the economy because we're ready to have an economic recovery. And this whole thing, these unemployment benefits, they're just getting in the way, man. Actually, in reality, they're not getting in the way. again, you cannot refuse a call to return back to work and get unemployment benefits. That doesn't happen, right? No, they're just using it as an excuse because, oh man, turns out people are realizing that they're getting screwed over by the government and by their employer, and we can't have that. So we got to take away that and give a payroll tax cut instead, which again furthers our conservative goals of hurting Social Security. So there's that, right? So now, if you really do care about economic recovery, then it would make sense to allow people to continue to have that benefit until this is basically over, expand it far longer, right, than July. And again, until employment starts to return to pre-coronavirus levels. I would add a UBI on top of that because what you want in a consumer-driven economy is for people to spend money. When people come out, you want them to have money that they're itching to spend. Like, oh my God, I can't wait to go out and watch a movie. Or I can't wait to go out and, frequent some restaurants. Yes, I've got all this money that I've saved up that I couldn't spend during the coronavirus pandemic because all the stores were closed naturally. So yeah, let's go out. Let's go spend some money. Let's drive the economy. That would be smart. Now, most people right now, they're not ready to come out, right? They're not ready to come out because we still have coronavirus. We still have a pandemic that's going on, that we still have cases that are rising. In fact, after Memorial Day, 3 weeks since Memorial Day, we have seen a gigantic spike in coronavirus cases. That's not an accident. That's exactly what we said was going to happen if you go out and you flout social distancing rules or physical distancing rules of 6 feet and not wear masks. What did you think was going to happen? The coronavirus is magically going to disappear because Donald Trump said it'll be gone by April. Remember that? It'll be gone by April. Well, here we are, mid-June, still not gone. In fact, they're talking about a second wave, although maybe that's incorrect because in order to have a second wave, you have to be done with the first one. And clearly, we're not done with the first one yet. Like I said, most people not ready to come out. Or there's a rest of those people that are too broke to do anything. Remember, not everybody is eligible for unemployment benefits. Like some people might have quit a job like a week before the shutdown, right? Or a week before all this stuff happened and wouldn't be eligible for this. Or, just all sorts of different circumstances where people are not eligible for those expanded unemployment benefits or any unemployment benefits. Not only that, but you have people that are navigating broken down systems that were set up intentionally to fail, like, for example, in Florida, or systems that can't handle the strain of millions upon millions of people trying to file for unemployment. That 40 million number, off, definitely off. Real unemployment is around 20%. Disastrous. Again, this is the worst unemployment that we have had since the Great Depression. Now, it's different than the Great Depression in the fact that this was an artificial shutdown as a result of doing something about coronavirus, but nonetheless, it is an economic shutdown. It is a recession/depression, and so there is that. And so now, without having that money, all those millions of people who also might be facing evictions as protections against being evicted are starting to wear out in many places. And so now we're facing not only an economic recession, but also you have a housing crisis. And it's because we didn't support these people. All we got was, again, unemployment benefits didn't help everybody. And also the $1,200 check that a select few got. It didn't apply to everybody. Not everybody was able to get it. And so that was supposed to last for 4 months. Ridiculous. No, not enough to stave off this economic hardship. We should have had a monthly UBI of at least $2,000 per person. That's what we should have had. Without that, we're gonna see some major issues. And it's going to hamper any sort of economic recovery that we were hoping for. But again, they don't care, right? Mnuchin, Kudlow, Trump, they're done. They're bored with coronavirus. Move on to the next one. Open it up. And it's time to open it up because, well, for one, they're not at risk. They're definitely not essential workers, I would say. Or at least they don't have to go and be around other people. Now, Donald Trump's stupid, so he goes around people. He doesn't wear a mask. He was shaking hands. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten it yet. Or maybe he has. I have no idea. But Kudlow, you think he can do his job at home? Of course he can. A lot of them do. And so they're really not as much at risk as anyone else, especially with the people that they're really trying to prod to get back into the workforce. People that, work in gyms or nail salons, restaurants, sit-down restaurants specifically. And so those are some problems, right? But no, they want to get people back. They don't take risk. And what they're really worried about is their stock portfolios. And that's what it is. And look, the stock market's been in a roller coaster. It has. And it'll go up by a lot, weirdly so, like after the announcement of, an additional few million people have got onto, have applied for unemployment. And then it'll also go down. And so it's been a real roller coaster. And so a lot of these people are like, I don't know, we open up the country, the stock will go up, and that's good for our investments. And then we can trade and we can make money. And that's what it's really all about. And so the only thing is that's really going to prod them into doing more. And I've been trying to keep up with whether or not they're going to do another round of $1,200 stimulus. Certainly after the jobs report came out, a lot of Republicans in Congress are like, nope, everything's normal, back to work. We don't need no more stimulus. But then I keep hearing about the White House saying, maybe more stimulus. I mean, the jobs report is good, but we might need a little bit more, at least another round. And we're going to talk about the HEROES Act and all that stuff. It's funding for the states. We don't know. We're not sure. So understand, if the stock market takes another gigantic shit, then yeah, we are going to go and probably end up seeing more stimulus. Republicans will add even more corporate relief. Corporate Democrats will pass it forward. And they will fund the states, and we might get another $1,200 check, but that's about it. Nothing really else, right? And so there's not going to be a lot more help for the American people. Again, for the corporations, they got all the help. We got very, very little, and that's going to continue to be the case going forward. I mean, whoever thought that Republicans are best on the economy? No, you don't pay attention, or maybe you think the stock market is a representation of the average worker. And based on what I've seen, though, and what we've seen, the data out there, stocks soaring as unemployment increases, I can assure you that is not the case. No, we actually need to continue to support the American worker by continuing these unemployment benefits, by instituting a UBI, and not stopping them. We need to expand these benefits until this crisis is over, or else, like I said, we're going to see even worse economic outcomes. And, look, speaking electorally, right, if Trump cares about re-election, you might want to consider these. Or, if somebody else wants to get elected, they might want to take a hard look at some of these policies that progressives have been floating, Medicare for all, UBI, etc., at least in the context of this pandemic, if you want to win. Because that's exactly what we need. All right. Moving on. So we'll have a little bit of fun before the break, and just some ridiculousness. Something pretty stupid happened over the weekend. on Twitter. Shocking, I know, right? I can't believe something dumb happened on social media. But it actually involves 2 congressmen and the actor that plays Hellboy. So already fascinating. So it started with Ron Perlman, known for starring in the movie Hellboy, got into a Twitter fight with Florida Representative Matt Gaetz. So look, Ron Perlman, he doesn't hold back. Let's just say that. And he said some things that I've disagreed with before. I think about progressivism, at least about Bernie Sanders. But he says other things that I do agree with, and also many things that are amusing, like what he said about Matt Gaetz. So now Gaetz and Trump criticized the U.S. Soccer Federation after the organization announced it would not force players to stand for the national anthem. I doubt Donald Trump has ever watched a soccer game in his life. Same thing with probably Matt Gaetz. I don't know. Maybe he could be a soccer fan. I just don't see it. And so they're like, nah. Or at least that's what I'm doing. I'm yeah. But Trump is like, oh, how dare you? How dare you guys actually not stand for the anthem? Ah! And that's Matt Gaetz as well. And so as far as I'm considering, again, it's like, whatever, right? Hey, we're not North Korea. Good decision. I mean, you shouldn't be forced to stand for the national anthem because, again, that's what they do in hardcore authoritarian countries. All right. So now Perlman said the U.S. soccer team called, and you guessed it, they said they couldn't give any less of an F about what you dipshits think, and tags real, Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz. So look, there's lots of foul language in the story, so that's always fun. Gaetz says a racial justice warrior, no problem in Hollywood portraying the white supremacist leader of a motorcycle gang. And, referring to, of course, Sons of Anarchy. So, okay, but you realize that's acting, right? I mean, it's the same thing that you do when you pretend that Donald Trump is a good leader. Oh, wait, it's Matt Gaetz. So, of course, he's not pretending. He's got his lips on Donald Trump's ass. And so, anyway, acting, where you at least are pretending to be a shitbag. Okay. And not actually being one in person, which is what Matt Gaetz and a few of the other people involved in this story are going to be. So Perlman replied, yes, sir, so true. So rewarding to play a-holes on TV. Tell me, sir, how is it actually being one? Fun. So they go back and forth, right? Now, Perlman decides he's going to get Jim Jordan involved. So now Jim Jordan was a wrestling coach at Ohio State. And so, look, there was a coach at Ohio State that was basically sexually assaulting the students, right? People on the wrestling team. And so he's involved, Jim Jordan's involved in that because basically he didn't go out and protect the students like he should have and had allegedly known about this abuse that was going on. So now Jim Jordan gets involved in this somehow because Ron Perlman says, you're lucky for this guy, Matt. If it weren't for him, you'd be the ugliest politician walking. And so, of course, like I said, that's a picture of Jim Jordan being talked about there. So generally, I don't go for the, low blows when it comes to people's looks and all that. Okay, whatever. Uncool. But then here's when Ted Cruz jumps in. Ted Cruz, I know I just said that I don't really go after people when it comes to looks, but Ted Cruz looks like a melted wax statue of himself that escaped from Madame Tussauds. Okay. Like, it's supposed to look, but he's melted. He's been in the sun a little bit too long. As for me, I haven't been in the sun enough. So look, I can give it and I can take it. I even give it to myself. So back to Ted Cruz, right? So he says, listen, Hellboy, you talk a good game when you've got Hollywood makeup on and Stutman, but I'll bet $10,000 to the non-political charity of your choice that you couldn't last 5 minutes in the wrestling ring with Jim Jordan without getting pinned. You up for it? Or does your publicist say too risky? Oh my God, that is Ted Cruz suddenly growing a backbone. What is going on? But wait, is it a temporary backbone like we saw in other situations? Well, we'll have to see. Now, Perlman, his response was, wait, is this the Ted Cruz? Holy shit, man. Is this the same guy that let little Donnie call his wife a dog and his father an assassin and now kisses his ass? Can I get your autograph? Oh, God, that's so good. So that is true. During the 2016 election, you had Donald Trump literally calling Ted Cruz's wife ugly and saying that his father was a person who killed JFK. I mean, some of the worst, most ridiculous stuff. And Ted Cruz for a while was like, oh yeah, I'm going to stand against Donald Trump. I'm not going to allow him to be the nominee. I am going to stand against him. That is, of course, until Ted Cruz's donors, I believe it was the Mercer family, came a knocking and said, Ted Cruz, you better knock that shit out. We pay you. You're our bitch. And we say, you're going to support Donald Trump. You know what Ted Cruz's response to it was? Picture tells 1,000 words. Sad. Baby. Beta. Oh my God. Cut. Totally and completely. So now, Perlman added, I'll tell you what, Teddy, since mentioning Jim Jordan in wrestling is problematic, why don't we say F him and just make it you and me? I'll give $50,000 to Black Lives Matter, and you can keep all the taxpayer money you were thinking of spending. And it goes on and on, with Ted Cruz, ironically, calling someone else soft, which is, again, hilarious, because when it came to Donald Trump, picture tells 1,000 words, like I said. Look, this literally may have been the dumbest story I've ever done, but hey, man, look, if this actually does happen, which would be hilariously awesome, both Jim Jordan and Ted Cruz, I think, would be 100% dismantled by Perlman. Great. And so, hey, I'd watch it. Well, that is, of course, unless I'm going to put a terrible image in your head right now. Ted Cruz is wearing wrestling spandex. Then I'd just like to hear about it in third person. No. Sorry for that. I apologize. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got Donald Trump and his war against reality and polling and facts and all that stuff coming up next. And then Stacey Abrams. So what does she have to say and why do I disagree with it? Stay tuned. We'll be right back around the nation.
Mike Pounds.
Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here, 218 Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. So let's just real quick thank a couple of channel members, Leo Crank and Robert Maddox. Thank you for signing up to be a channel member. Patreon.com/TYT Nation. I think we have a new one, Toby. So thank you for signing up to be a patron, Toby. And so I just want to get hurry to this next story. We're running low on time. All right. President Donald Trump's aides are now literally hiding information from the president that disputes his fragile little worldview. You know, that same worldview that says Donald Trump is awesome and he's going to win re-election in a landslide. According to a report from the Daily Beast, these same officials are doing their best to keep him in the dark about terrible poll numbers regarding the 2020 election, for fear of upsetting him like the baby he is and turning him into an impotent, frothing rage. So that, of course, has led to a cease and desist letter aimed at CNN with the goal of getting them to retract a poll that had Biden about 14 points ahead of Trump. So that letter was hilarious and incredibly sad and super, super pathetic. That is super beta cuck. I'm just going to say it, right? That's what someone who is so unsure, the poll, you got to take back the poll. It's fake news. Whatever, dude. Cry more. So this wasn't just mocked by me and CNN and Left Wing and everybody on TV and your grandma probably, everybody was laughing at it. Even members of the Trump administration had laughed at it. One official called it, quote, the dumbest thing I've read in a long time. Quote, this is according to the Beast's report. In one respect, it was just the latest effort by the president's aides to attempt to satisfy the boss's appetite for retribution against CNN. But it also revealed an element of the Trump political operation that has increasingly demanded time, money, and attention, mainly the task of convincing Trump that the electoral landscape and polling deficits he faces aren't as dire as he's been hearing. Now, look, is there a case to make that polling could be wrong? Abso-freaking-lutely. Look at the 2016 election, way, way off. The polls were super, super off. And that's why, of course, you need to look at any kind of polling that's going on now, a little bit of skepticism, and understand that, hey, things could change. The situation can change. The polling numbers can definitely change, and all of that based on the situation. But it's not just about polling, right? Remember, Donald Trump, he is in the defensive seat now. He has got to defend giving and using his entire term to give corporations massive tax cuts, to deregulate them, to showcase his massive personal corruption. He was impeached once so far, first term impeachment, and then they watched him complain and melt down on Twitter every single day. This is during a pandemic, an economic recession, and a massive social movement against police brutality. And so, deeply, deeply unpopular president. And yet, on all of those things, right, Trump has taken the opposite stance that a leader would take. He's hid out in his bunker. He's used the military to crush peaceful protesters. Also, he can get a photo op where he's holding a Bible, and then has used, again, the office very, very openly, very transparently to benefit himself and his friend. Look at all the golf trips he's taken. Look at the trip with, I believe it was Donald Jr., that used $75,000 of taxpayer money to go hunt a sheep. Like, you've got to be kidding me. And all of those things, like I said, are working against him People are tired of this. And yet, the White House, people in the White House have such a terrible job that they have to go and go, oh, no, Donald, it's not as bad as it seems. I mean, yes, these poll numbers are horrific dumpster fire level, but they could be wrong. They could be wrong. They probably are wrong. So don't worry about it, right? In fact, one official who's been part of a meeting with the president about this, about his re-election prospects, says that this helps keep the president from flying into a rage as much as he otherwise would. Baby. Sad. Beta. Fifis over facts. That's what that is. I mean, come on, dude. Now, the report notes the aides are assuring the president that there is a lack of enthusiasm and that the polling could be wrong. Now, look, both of those points I will definitely concede. Is there a lack of enthusiasm when it comes to Joe Biden? Abso-freaking-lutely. But understand that this election, this is not about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a stand-in. He's basically generic Democrat A, but with like, hey, I was Obama's VP thrown in, which does obviously give him a little bit more of an advantage, right? But understand this is a referendum election. This is not the same as when Donald Trump went up against Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was far more unpopular than Joe Biden. Plus, it was an election where you had status quo versus radical change, right? Now, I'm not saying that Joe Biden isn't status quo, but understand that the dynamic has changed. We're in a completely different dynamic now where most people miss the status quo. Now, that's incredibly frustrating to me as a leftist, right? Because the status quo literally is what got us Trump in the first place. And it has been a disaster. But it's also true that there are a lot of people that have buyer's remorse for letting Donald Trump win or for voting for Donald Trump. And so they would elect pretty much anybody. And I think what cemented this, other than the intense corruption, personal corruption that is going on in the White House for quite some time, was using the military against peaceful protesters for the photo op and his disastrous response to coronavirus and the economic harm that has resulted from it. And so people now are like, I don't know, I'd vote for a ham sandwich. Well, guess what? Joe Biden is the hammiest ham sandwich on ultra white bread with no condiments whatsoever. He is plain, he is Spartan, might turn bad pretty soon here, right? There might be a couple mold spots there. But so far, it's a little bit more palatable than Trump, who is just a rotten shit sandwich filled with arsenic. Pretty bad. So nonetheless, this probably explains why Trump this entire thing is running the same kind of election he ran against Hillary Clinton, because he doesn't know how to run anywhere else. He doesn't know how to defend and doesn't have a record to defend on. Okay. So he's got that, that mindset of attack. Well, that worked really well against Hillary. And let's be honest, he'll probably get some pretty good body blows in against Biden. Now, he'll do it in probably the most hypocritical ways, of course, because Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both really, really bad on a lot of separate issues. Trump, of course, being to Biden's benefit somehow magically worse than the worst Democrats that we can come up with. But that will be enough to get people out there to say, well, look, we know Biden sucks, but we got to get this monster out of office. That's what this is. And so, yeah, ham sandwich. But Trump has no strategy whatsoever. And the thing about this is that few people are out there willing to say this. They're willing to say that. The Beast explains, a chunk of the re-election team focuses on proving to the president that his dumpster fire numbers aren't as bad as they seem, or reinforcing Trump's conviction that pollsters get it wrong all the time. The report notes that two officials think the president, when confronted with the poor numbers, isn't taking them seriously, and that may be because officials are softening the blow when speaking to the president. Pollster Frank Luntz said this. He said that Trump may be victim of pollsters who are bought and paid for, and they will tell you, the client, what you want to hear. Shocker to hear Frank Luntz talk this way. Again, this is the guy who poll tests different like phrases and all that to basically come up with ways to make conservative, terrible policy sound super awesome and helpful. That Frank Luntz. And he's like, I can't believe all these ass-kissing pollsters around Donald Trump won't tell him like it is. But he says this: I don't envy those who have to tell Donald Trump what he doesn't want to hear. I've met him several times. I met Biden several times. I would rather present bad polling information to Biden than Donald Trump. Presenting bad information or tough information to Joe Biden, you'll break his heart. If you present tough information to Donald Trump, he breaks your arm. You know who does that? A baby. Somebody who can't control their emotions. And that's who Donald Trump is. He can't control himself. And look, that's one reason why I do think Biden's going to win this. I think he is going to walk to the election. I think Donald Trump is in a terrible, terrible position. Now, again, as a leftist, I think this sucks because we missed a gigantic opportunity. I mean, I'm not saying that I want Donald Trump to win. No, what I'm saying is that we missed a chance to get a more progressive candidate. Because if a ham sandwich can beat Donald Trump, then Bernie Sanders, who was constantly ahead in every single matchup, and Donald Trump had policy positions that were incredibly popular with the majority of people, even people who had voted for Biden in many of these states that had primaries. The problem was you had that electability argument that was beaten into the head of everyone. And yet we find out, of course, that the electability argument is garbage. It's trash. Joe Biden and pretty much, again, every other Democrat is electable compared to Donald Trump. And so we miss this opportunity to get a president that would push for real progressive change and actually prevent a possibly worse Donald Trump from coming down the line. And so that's the thing. And look, I know, look, it's depressing, right? It's depressing to know that Biden is simply going to win by not being Donald Trump. It is everything that we as leftists hope that we wouldn't be forced to contend with. The situation of, well, here we go with that lesser of two evils. Frustrating as hell. All right. All right, I have to fix a video here. But just letting everybody know. Let me do that now.
False choice idea.
All right. I'll fix. Democrat Stacey Abrams and the liberal establishment think that the calls to defund the police are a bit too radical, and we need to do something else. In fact, here's what she said about this on This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
I think we're being drawn into this false choice idea. The reality is we need two things. We need reformation of how police officers do their jobs, how law enforcement does its job. Because what happened yesterday to Rayshard Brooks was a function of excessive force and the decision that the fact that they were either embarrassed or, panicked led them to murder a man who they knew only had a taser in his hand. We know that the murder of Breonna Taylor means that we have to reform no-knock warrants. We know that in the state of Georgia, we also have to look at the larger judicial issue of the fact that people can use citizen arrest laws to murder men like Ahmaud Arbery in the streets. So reformation is absolutely important. What we saw happen in New York is a part of this. But I also know that we have to have a transformation of how we view the role of law enforcement, how we view the construct of public safety, and how we invest not only in the work that we need them to do to protect us, but the work we need to protect and build our community.
So that's Stacey Abrams. Reformation and transformation instead of defunding the police. So look, before I get into the details of where we agree and where we obviously are going to disagree here, but let me note that Stacey Abrams is currently auditioning to be Joe Biden's vice president. Like, we know this, right? Joe Biden says, oh, let's not defund the cops. In fact, Joe Biden has a plan to invest more money into the police. So we're going to give more money to the cops. Also, Biden is known for authoring the 94 crime bill. He has been on the side of tough on crime legislation for quite some time. So understand that he's not going to be in favor of defunding the police. She's not going to be in favor of defunding the police. And so that's where they stand. So now, again, go back to the reformation and transformation. What does that mean? Well, nobody really knows. We don't know what that means. Now, defunding the police, we know exactly what that means, because it basically means you take money from the police departments and you put it somewhere else. Now, instead of course, money for law enforcement, we should be using that money to solve problems in the community. You get to the root of crime and then serve the community, right? That's what I think we should be doing. Defund the police, take some money away from the police departments, and use it to fund other services to prevent crime. Now, that doesn't mean abolish police, right? It's the same way as defunding education hasn't actually abolished schools. However, there is a difference, because unlike calls from the right wing to defund education, we don't want the police to do more with less. We actually want the police to do less. I mean, before you think, wait a minute, whoa, you want the police to do less? What are you talking about? Yeah, well, we want police to do less other jobs and more actually responding to crime. I mean, for example, right? Does it make sense to have police responding to all domestic disputes, to like an argument between a couple? Does that make sense to have a heavily armed police officer there to give marital advice or whatever? No, look, if there's a situation where there's violence, sure. But why don't you have that officer be accompanied instead by a social worker? That social worker can use their specific talents to de-escalate the situation, while the officer stands there just in case that is not possible, to provide essentially security to that social worker while they actually solve the actual problem. I mean, that sounds like it's at least better for the community, better for the couple. And of course, in the case of somebody dealing with mental health, why don't you have a mental health professional ride along with the police officer to a specific call in order to help this mentally ill person? Because we've seen time and time again, police officers not prepared to deal with people's specific mental illnesses, not trained, not prepared, and then someone ends up either getting hurt or getting killed. Police should be solving crime, not dealing with relationship baggage. The only reason they should be there is to provide security and, deal if there's some sort of assault, but also to help de-escalate the situation. Defunding also means demilitarizing the police. There's no need for your everyday beat officer to look like he's ready to battle Al-Qaeda in the streets of rural Kentucky. They're not there. And look, in the case where you do need a heavily armed response, there are still SWAT teams. And that's what those are for. Regular beat officers do not need military arms. They do not need tanks. What we need is community to be strengthened with the money that is right now being used to oppress those communities. So there needs to be more education, more job opportunities in these communities, more social workers to help with those other problems, more mental health professionals. We need partnership between these different agencies with the police to be able to do things better to serve the community. And right now, we don't have that. We have the police departments that are outfit to be essentially a hammer, to look at every situation through the lens of a hammer. And when you do that, every little problem that pops up looks like a nail. And that's the problem. And that's, of course, a problem with the culture of policing as well. And that needs to absolutely change. Now, Stacey Abrams says, oh, well, why don't we transform the police? Well, what I just outlined would be a gigantic transformation, a bold transformation, and one that would benefit all the communities. But what does she mean by transformation? Again, we don't know. But I know that we need to take away, if we want to see a good transformation, the outrageous funding that we lavish on police departments, which is a leftover artifact of the 1980s and the ridiculous tough on crime approach. And we need to take away that punitive approach. And look, the only thing that does is it basically focuses on what happens after crimes are committed. What we need to do is crime prevention. We should focus on what we should do to eliminate the factors that produce violent crime. And then, of course, some of those factors are poverty, mental illness, addiction, and greed, right? We need to work on those issues. And, of course, you're not going to prevent all crimes, of course, but and so you do need police in some form, but that form needs to look very, very different than what we have today. And I don't mean just like, let's hire more Black officers or more community police officers. No, we need actual, real transformation. And that starts with defunding. It definitely does. So understand that the problem that I have with Stacey Abrams is that she's being incredibly wishy-washy. That's the problem. Now, Bernie Sanders did say something a little bit similar. However, when you read past the headline, he does have some ideas on actual transformation. He says, well, let's not defund or abolish. Let's actually do a transformation. And here's how I plan to do it. Well, at least you got details, and some of them are actually pretty good proposals and details. But Abrams is saying, no, we just need to transform. If you're not saying, if you're not saying that, well, then you have a false choice. It's not a false choice. I mean, look, if you're looking at it from the framing that the right wing wants you to have, well, then of course it seems like a false choice, right? But the problem is they're being very, very wishy-washy about this entire thing, and that's the real problem here, right? So now, Cenk Uygur tweeted this out. So now, look, I'm part of the TYT network. I'm part of the Young Turks. And so, like, Cenk's your butt. Well, it's complicated, but let's just say that I disagree with him on this issue because he tweeted this out. He said, let me pick up on what Stacey Abrams just said. Defund the police slogan is being used to divide us, i.e. the right-wing framing. She called for transformation of police that's much stronger than just reform, but not distracting like defunding. Transform the police is appealing to most people and sounds strong. It might sound strong, but again, if you don't have any details to back it up, then really it does come across to be wishy-washy, pandery, etc. And so, look, it's not as direct as defund. Defund is incredibly direct. You know exactly what it means, even though the right wing has been trying very well or very much to try to make you think that defund is the same as get rid of all police, and that's not true, right? So Cenk got a lot of pushback for that tweet, and basically what the reason why is he's appealing it to, well, hey man, look, it sounds strong and it's popular, right? I get that argument. Yes, argument ad populum. You want to make sure to get something that people are comfortable with so that they would be in favor. I get that, right? But again, the idea behind transform is pretty vague. There's really no meaning, right? So now he says in another tweet, A lot of people who say defund the police mean abolish the police, but a lot don't, which is true. It's true that a lot don't. Now, look, if you're saying defund and abolish, then that doesn't make sense, right? Because why would you need to defund something if you're just going to get rid of it? But abolish, again, end goal, right? If that's your end goal. It's not my end goal. My end goal is to tear it down and start something new, start something different that's better for the community, and maybe using the European police as a model, because they seem to not have an issue like in America of shooting their own citizens. I'm just saying, maybe you should go with what works. And I guess if you have a different definition of what works, meaning, thousands of not just black people, but also white people, obviously disproportionately black people are shot by police. Well, if you think that's a success, then we're not going to have a conversation. I don't think that's a success. The majority of the public do not think that's a success. And so maybe we need to start freaking over. That would be great. All right. So now more to this tweet. He says, if you want to abolish, great, then defund framing is a good way to start. But no, it's not. That doesn't make sense. But if you don't want to abolish, defund is making people think that you do. Oh, again, that's what right-wing framing. The conservatives are framing defund and abolish as the same thing. And as he points out, there are some leftists who do as well. And understand that that's not the same thing. Not the same thing at all. The right wing says radical leftists want to defund and abolish police. That's not true, right? They've been making those two things, they've been doing everything they can to make those two things interchangeable. I'm going to go ahead and reject that framing because it's crap. It's not the same thing at all. Defund is not making, it's not about, defund is about making the police not be the end-all be-all force to handle all situations, all problems. I think that cops have too much responsibility as it is. And as a result of doing too much, they do too much and do it all very badly. Why don't we let actual mental health professionals deal with people who appear to be mentally ill? Why not let them do that, right? That's, again, because dealing with mental illness is not the job of police. And look, if you think that mental health workers, right, cannot handle a combative mentally ill person, why don't you go to any adult foster care home and ask about some of the people, some of the clients that they end up handling when they go into a behavior? I mean, you want to talk about uncooperative residents. Well, the only difference is you can't put this person in an illegal chokehold. Can't do it. You can't put your knee on their neck for 9 minutes straight. Can't do that. No, the people that deal with these clients, they get hit, kicked, attacked, literally shit on. I mean, look, my wife works in one of those homes. She got some stories, right? And again, they're not allowed to do any of the stuff that the police do. And when dealing with mentally ill, quote unquote, suspects or people having episodes, and the family ends up calling the police because they think the cops are going to help, and which the cops have no idea what they're doing. So no, we should not be doing that. We should not be doing that at all. No, cops should be dealing only with violent crimes, right? And an investigation for other nonviolent crimes. But we should be letting social workers, mental health professionals, and other experts deal with other things, other calls that normally come out to the police. Because we have put too much responsibility in the hands of the police, and they have proven time and time again that they cannot handle it, and that's why we need to defund them. Now, Cenk goes on to acknowledge a good argument for defunding, right? Or at least what he calls a good argument. And he says, look, having the conversation is shifting the Overton window to the left on the policing. That's a good thing, right? But he does say that's both good and bad. Good because long-term, we're going to have some electoral victories because of that shift. Short term, we're going to have electoral losses. So he's got this perspective, and I can understand where it comes from, right? The perspective of, hey, I want to win and get good policy, right? And get better policy. And if that means, quote unquote, transform, whatever. Now, the problem I see with that, of course, is that we've had this call to reform for quite some time. And it's led to not a lot getting actually reformed. We still have major issues. And so I think that, if you're going to go with an incrementalist approach, you're not going to solve the real problem. You've got to think big. And here's the thing. Here's how I back that up. Black Lives Matter has gotten more change in the last few weeks by taking to the streets than electing corporate Democrats or even electing progressives Democrats. I'm not saying that the work that progressive Democrats are doing in Congress isn't good, right? I'm just saying that direct action is a major, major driver. Because guess what? That direct action pushes local governments, it pushes state governments, and in some cases, it can push Congress as well. I mean, for example, anytime that we've had massive demonstrations, think about civil rights, right? Think about the civil rights, the fight for civil rights. Think of the mass protest that was involved. And of course, the horrible ways they tried to shut down that protest, right? Think about that. At some point, it got too much for even Congress, and they approved, and they pushed through civil rights, the Civil Rights Act, right? Not only that, but you had women's suffrage. Another great example. Mass protests. Because women didn't have the power to vote. They couldn't partake in electoral politics. So they took to the streets. And they pushed and they pushed and they fought on the street level. And they got Congress to move. So you have to have this action on the ground if you're going to have any electoral change. Because, again, the people on the ground are the drivers of electoral change, not elected officials. And I think that's what Bernie Sanders meant by political revolution. Maybe I was wrong originally. But again, what he had said in plenty of his speeches, millions of people getting out there, getting involved. And I think that meant getting out onto the street instead of just getting out to the polls. And so if you're in the streets, that's going to push your politicians. Now, if you're saying, oh, no, electoral politics is the only thing that's going to get you change, I completely disagree with you. And I don't think Cenk's saying that. I think the Democrats are saying that, the Democratic establishment, because their main thing is, vote. But voting by itself is not going to get anything. You have to get out on the streets. You have to. I'm not saying you shouldn't participate in voting. You absolutely should. But after you cast your ballot, get your ass in the street. Because it turns out protests work. All right. I know that went a little bit long, but I had a lot of things to talk about on that one. So, yeah. All right. Massively out of time, guys. But there's so many great comments from you all. And of course, we do the show together. So thank you for being a part of it and sharing those comments. In fact, James Watson, thank you. Zach Sherman says ACAB. And let's see. Again, there's a lot of comments here. Let's see. I'm considered a wild-eyed socialist. I'm really moderate. Yeah, look, this entire, I think the last 4 years has done more to radicalize me than anything else. And even with radical, right? Even in considering myself a radical, I'm still like probably to the world center left. Ridiculous. So, ham sandwich miracle whip 2020. Yep. We'll end with that. Thank you guys for going around the nation with me today. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the super chats. Please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation or a channel member by hitting the join button below. And everybody stay safe. Have a great afternoon / evening, depending on where you are, or even like middle of the night, as some of you who are in different parts of the world. And I love that I have worldly viewers. It's kind of awesome. Even if you're in just here peeking in at the madness, the nuttiness that is the United States right now. All right. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys later.
Mike Pounds.
Please clap.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Tolerate.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.